Joining me now here at Queen's Park is Premier Kathleen Wynne. Thank you for joining us. You've made a big hydro announcement promising relief to taxpayers, 25% reduction on their bills. But you're fudging the numbers. It's not 25% because you've already announced 8%. So really the announcement is 17% today.
Well, here's the thing. By the summer, everyone who pays electricity in their home will see a 25 on average. For some it'll be a bit less, for some it'll be a bit more, but we'll see around a 25% reduction. And for people who live in rural communities or in remote areas, they're actually going to see a greater than 25% reduction because we're going to lower their distribution costs. So it's a significant change.
But there's going to be a price to pay long term. This is not coming cheap. In essence, taxpayers are going to be paying billions over the next, 2-3 decades to cover this cost.
Well, here's the thing. We've made about $50 billion of investments in the system. So building towers, rebuilding lines, shutting down the coal plants and building generation to fill that supply. And those investments had to be made. For decades before we came into office under my predecessor in 2003, there had not been investments in the system. We've made those investments and there's a cost associated with those. So what we're saying is it's not fair that this generation would have to pay for all of those costs. We believe that it's more fair to spread those over a longer period of time. So instead of paying those off in 20 years, spread it over a 30-year period as you would a mortgage, Cynthia.
Then why wasn't that done in the first place? And why didn't you do this 2 years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago? And are you doing this to save your political job?
So we have been looking for some time. So not just starting in November, but for a couple of years. We've been looking for ways to take electricity costs down.
But even just a couple of years isn't long enough to have reacted to this situation that for many families is a crisis.
Well, but what I'm saying is that over the last couple of years, it has become more acute. And if you look at the way electricity prices have been going up, it's been the last few years that they've gone very, very high, very, very quickly. So we put in place the Ontario Electricity Support Program. We put the 8% in place. We renegotiated contracts like the Samsung contract. But all of that together, Cynthia, wasn't enough, which is why we've been looking for a more structural change. We looked at everything, you know, we talked to academics, we talked to people in their homes, we talked to people all over the province, and we've come up with this 25% reduction by sharing the costs over a longer period of time, reducing people's distribution costs who live in rural and remote areas, and putting in place other supports like expanding the low-income support program, putting in place an affordability fund. So we've made a lot of changes.
There is a discernible change in temperature in this province. People are angry at the Liberals. They blame the Liberals. They blame you for these skyrocketing hydro costs. At what point would you step down?
I have a job to do, and I'm doing my job. And
so you're going to run in the next election no matter what?
I'm running in the next election.
Even if the polls are dismal and perhaps a predecessor might have a better shot?
You know, the polls that are important are the polls on election day. I made a commitment in 2014 that I would implement our plan. I've been implementing our plan and at the same time responding in a responsible way to people's concerns. The electricity prices is a huge concern and it's my responsibility as Premier to fix that.
But is this not all about positioning yourself so that you could have another election win? I mean, we've seen a lot of the announcements. You threw John Tory under the bus over the polls, knowing the road tolls, knowing that would not go over well with the 905. You've just signed or offered deals to teachers early, you know, to avoid any labor disruption. Is this all part of a grand, you know, path to trying to be Premier again, despite the odds?
So here's the thing. I mean, if we look at those decisions in one at a time, the tolling decision was about affordability for people. It absolutely was. There had not been a regional discussion. People in the night, well, no, but
you
people
led him to believe that he could go ahead with it and you would have give his blessing.
I'm not philosophically opposed to tolls. We've got high occupancy toll lanes, but people have options. But there was an affordability issue that had not been addressed, and you know, there had not been a regional discussion. If we look at labor peace, I mean, you know, we've been talking about labor peace in education for a very long time, and it's very important to me that kids have that peace in their schools, that teachers are able to teach and not be worried about labor disruption. So it's absolutely part of what I believe is important to have that labor peace in the system, whether there's an election coming or not. And the same goes for electricity prices. Whether there's an election or not, there's always a political narrative. I'm a politician. There's always a political story.
Can a politician stay too long in the job? Come on, you've seen it. Like, at what point do you know?
History will write that story. You know, I made a commitment in 2014 that I was going to implement my plan. I'm doing that. My job's not done, and I'm going to continue.
Premier Wynne, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks, Cynthia.